How do you introduce yourself in Chinese?
Um, if you are meet with people like for the first time, you can say 你好. And if you want to introduce like I am blah blah blah, you can say 我是 blah blah blah. And if you have known these people for a long time, you can say which is like similar like hi y'all, and you can say hi 你好朋友, which means friends in Chinese.
Cool. And someone had asked earlier about like nutritional info, like of how healthy maybe the chakalaka is or the noodles. I don't know if you guys know a little bit about that.
I'm not sure specifically about the nutritional info of South African foods, but I do know that in a lot of their dishes, they use a lot more fresh foods and less processed foods than we see sometimes in the US. So my guess from that would be that some of those foods are quite healthy, but that's not always necessarily true.
Yeah, so in China, we usually have noodles, but because it has different like recipes, so sometimes you will add a lot of like unnatural ingredients, like too much soy sauce. Probably maybe it's not good for health, but you can make like your own recipe, like having more vegetables, some like healthy foods to put in the noodles instead of others. So I think like you can make a healthy bowl for noodles, but also you can make an unhealthy one. Just like depends.
Okay. And do the pizza restaurants in South Africa have regular, like similar USA toppings options too?
Yeah, they do. One of my favorite pizzas is Hawaiian, and so I got a Hawaiian pizza while I was there. So they have a lot of toppings that y'all would all be more used to, and then some different combinations as well.
And Abby, what made you want to study in South Africa? And Sharon, what made you want to study in the US?
Okay. So one of my best friends was born in South Africa, and she grew up most of her life in the US, but all of her family, except for her parents and brother, still live in South Africa. And so when I was trying to decide what to do for my summer, she was already planning on going there and offered that I could come with her. And so I started looking into programs there, and that's how I decided to go. And it was really amazing because we got to stay with her family there. So in each of the cities we went into, we were staying with her family members, which was cool because I got to see a lot of what really traditional South African life looks like in the homes instead of staying in like a hotel or something.
Okay. So my family moved to US like 4 years ago, so that's why I came to US for study. But the education here, which is really different from China, because in universities we always offer like liberal arts education, so you can try like different kind of subjects based on your interest or like your future career. But in China, you will have to take some like specific course, no matter like whether you are interested or not, but you will become know every subject if you study in China, but which is really hard for some of the students because they are not really like interested in it. So that's the reason like makes me to study in US, because I think I want to study like some topics that are really interesting too, just instead of like having everything. Yeah.
And just to be clear, there's no bunny in bunny chow.
That is true.
How do you know how it got its name by chance?
That's actually a good question. I do not know how bunny chow got its name. Yeah, no, I just know where it came from. So there's definitely not bunny in it. It's often chicken or beef or some other type of meat that they make the curry with. But I'm not quite sure where the name came from. I'll have to look it up.
And what's your favorite meal of the ones you listed?
That's hard. They were all very good. I think one of my favorites was the bunny chow or the puikikos. Both were very delicious.
I like dim sum because they have like really like different kinds of dish for the whole meal, so you can try like almost like 20 like dishes in this like same meal, which is like really great because like you have different choices and it's great to make choices. So
what other things are there to eat besides meat in South Africa? Here's the question. I'll be right back.
So there's, some of the things I talked about didn't have meat in it. So chakalaka doesn't necessarily have meat in it. And that's because when the mine workers were making it, they often didn't have the money to buy meat or just the access to meat. So that was never added to the dish. Also, most of the dishes do have meat in them, but they also eat a lot of vegetables, mashed potatoes, like things that we would eat as well as sort of side dishes. They have a lot of that often gets paired with some of the meat dishes. So while meat is pretty dominant throughout all the meals, there are some things that don't have meat in them, or that it would be very difficult, I think, to be vegetarian in South Africa. So what type of meat is usually used in Chinese dishes?
Okay, so in China we will also have like beef, chicken, yeah, I think that too, like we use it at most. And but because like China is really big and based on location we have different recipes for food. So in some places they will use beef, eat the raw beef sometimes. Like in other places they will like cook it like in smoke, which like looks beautiful because like you can see like the fire in the kitchen. And yeah.
Do they have buffets in China?
Yeah, we do have buffets, but it's like different from here. So usually the buffet in China is like really expensive, and they will serve a lot of like expensive food like seafood, and people usually pay like couple hundreds of RMB, which is like over 100 US dollars, I think. Yeah, for buffet. But you will usually like save money to go into buffets, even if it's that expensive, because the food in buffet is really fresh and like well cooked. So some like kids will love to go into buffets. Like they will also like ask their parents, like, can I go to buffets when on my birthday? And then yeah, their parents would do it. So
what are some of the differences, the cultural differences that you notice between China and the US and South Africa and the US?
Yeah, so I can go. So I think one of the main things, which is what I talked about, is just how important their local community and families are. Everywhere I went, that was like one of the biggest things I noticed was just how connected the family units were, or the communities. The communities felt like families, even if they weren't necessarily all related. And that's super important to people in South Africa. And I think you still have close families and communities in the US as well, but you don't see it as widespread as really important as in South Africa. So that's a big one, which also you see in how they eat and some of their dishes as well. I think another interesting thing about South African culture that's maybe not so different from the US is just how diverse it is. And there's 11 different official languages of the country, and there's, because of colonial influences, there's European influence, there's Asian cultural influences. There's lots of different variety in a lot of the African cultures. And so I think it is just incredibly diverse is another big part of South African culture.
Yeah, so like in China, we also have like different languages. We call it dialogue. Like in some cities, even though like we are like sister cities, so you only live like 20 miles from our city, but you will speak two different languages, and we can totally understand each other. And also Chinese have 55 minorities, so it have like different nationalities, and the most the nationalities have the most population is called Han, and others, it has their own culture and own language and like their own traditions, which Chinese government give them the land and just preserve their culture within like one place, and you can like go visit there, and but because they're minority, so I think like 90% of people are in high nationalities. And besides languages, China, um, there's one word in China we call it is 关系, which means relationship. So the relationship between the community and the kings of the regions is really important. Most of the kids will like have the last name for your father, your grandfather, and probably your family have a history with more than like 1,000 years, and you can trace of it because we there is a like record for your family. So it is really important to like be with your family in China, and you will have you will like grow up with your relatives together, and like we will help each other for the whole family. And yeah, I think that's like different from US because if my friends live in the US, they are like really far away with their family, and it's like difficult to contact with them. But even though like if you live in a like far away in China, people will usually like get together maybe like once a month or like couple times a year, because we have like traditional festivals, so you have to be together with your family in those festivals, just like Christmas.
What are some popular sports in China and South Africa?
So sports are really big in South Africa. Some of like soccer is the most popular sport there, so that's familiar, although they do call it football. And then some sports that we don't have as commonly in the US, rugby is really popular in the Afrikaans community, which is the Dutch population of South Africa. And so rugby is really popular. And rugby has a football, American football type ball, but has rules kind of similar to soccer. It's kind of a combination of soccer and American football and lots of different things. And then cricket is also a sport that's really popular in South Africa that we don't really have. And it's kind of like baseball. There's a pitcher and batters and stuff, but the rules are very different from baseball. I think those are some of the three big ones. And then they also just have a lot of recreational sports. Like in Cape Town, it's a big city for biking. Everyone bikes, and there's huge bike races all over Cape Town. And then because it's a coastal city, surfing is also really popular in Cape Town. So there's things like that as well.
Yeah. So in Chinese schools, boys usually play um, soccer and like badminton, and girls usually do badminton as well. But in the middle school in China, girls will also dance, like not the cheerleading, but um, like uh, like gymnastics. Yeah, gymnastics, and but not like a competition gymnastics, but just for fun. And um, even though like Chinese really bad at like soccer, but we usually play it at school. Um, Besides, we also plays a lot of ping pong, um, and I think like each school have like a couple of ping pong tables, and people will play it after school. Yeah.
And what are the main religions or religious practices in China and South Africa that you know about?
So, like I said, South Africa is really diverse. So, religion is the same way. I don't think that there's one religion that is kind of overarching in South Africa. There's, I mean, a lot of like religion, like big religions like we see in the US. So, Islam and Christianity. Are there in South Africa. There's also a lot of other like African religions that we wouldn't necessarily have as much in the US. So I think just like the population is diverse, religion is also really diverse.
So in China, most people know about Buddhism, but they don't really like believe in that. So they really don't have like religious, and um, most of the schools doesn't like encourage like you tell your religious in school. So we don't know whether he or she like believes or not. But because of the huge population, so there's a lot of Christian church and Catholic churches as well. So, but even though like many people doesn't really believe in the Buddhism, but they will go into the temple and say like, oh, I wish I have like a good grade, or I wish I go into the college, because like going to college is a really big thing in China, and it's really hard because you have to take the exam, like just take the exam once to go into college instead of having other uh, like standards. So parents will also like always going to the temple, like wish their kids going to the college, and I think that's like the main religious practices somehow in China.
Do you guys prefer American lifestyle or a lifestyle in China or South Africa better?
So, where I was living in Cape Town, South Africa, Cape Town's a really big city. And so, as far as lifestyle, it didn't feel that different to how I live in the US as well. I was in a house and we drove a car to get to work every day, and would go out to restaurants or coffee shops for lunch. And so it honestly was felt really familiar. So I don't think I would say I prefer one or the other. I really loved Cape Town. Cape Town was an incredible city. It has mountains and the ocean. And lots of things to do. I really like hiking, so we did a lot of hiking and stuff like that. So I loved Cape Town and definitely hope to go back someday. Yeah.
So, because the culture in China and in US is like really different, so I think I'm kind of like a multicultural person, and like I don't like really to stay in one of the country, and if there's like chance, I want to like stay both. And I like the food in China because it's like really different, and you can also try food from other countries like US, like uh, Japan, Korea, and even like food in South Africa as well, because food is a really big thing in China, and um, everyone will like go out for food, and um, the types of food in China is really diverse as well. But in US, you can like have your like private space sometimes. Like you can stay on your own, and there was nobody like judge you sometimes. But in China, if you live with your family, your parents will like um, because we are a family, and we have to like discuss things together instead of like making your own choice. So I would like to say like I want to stay in both.
And after you finish at UNC, do you want to work in the United States or in China?
I think because my career plan is doing global education, I think I will like work like in both countries if I can.
And what kind of music is popular in the countries you've been to?
So in South Africa, I think there's a lot of really big South African artists. So I think that's what they listen to most. We actually, or me and my friend I was with, got to go to a concert. There was just like a small concert in a mall in Cape Town and see an artist called Mujozi, who's a South African artist, and see him perform, which was really fun. So kind of pop music that's similar to the US, but they have a lot of their own artists, but they also listen to some of the same artists as us. Rihanna and Chris Brown and The Weeknd and Justin Bieber, all of those we would hear on the radio in South Africa as well. The music.
Okay. So in China, we also like listen to different kind of music, but we have our own traditional music, which is called Mingyue, and then they played by the instrument that is handmade in China, and I think the music type is really different from like any other music that we know in the US. And if you guys like have an interest on that, you can like search on the YouTube and look one of the piece, and it's really interesting.
Okay.